Oh, boy. Did you call her or did she call you?
No, her neighbor
Okay.
went to try and get the sign, but he's a knucklehead.
He's it's okay.
Wear a mask.
Our audio's on.
He doesn't care.
I don't care. Wouldn't wear a mask in the village hall, kicked him out.
Okay. The young Hispanic guy?
Huh?
Young Hispanic guy or the
Oh, no,
African-American fellow?
no.
I think that's what she said.
His name's.
Good morning, everybody.
Oh, I know who it is.
Yeah, you do.
I do.
I'm Vern Tepe, Chair of the Public Service Committee, and I hereby call to order the meeting of the Public Service Committee on Thursday, February 17th, 22. Can we have a roll call, please?
Brown,
Brown here.
Leonard,
Leonard here.
Lewis,
Lewis here.
Shepro, Surges,
Serge is here.
Copey, Tepe,
Tepe here. We have a quorum. Okay. May I have a unanimous motion to approve the minutes of January 20th, 2022?
Brown moves for that.
Serge is second.
We have unanimous motion. Any objection? Okay, minutes are approved. Do we have any public comments? I don't see anybody in the audience. Is there anybody online that wanted to make a public comment? Good, we perhaps might be out of here early, who knows? Finance Department. Nobody here from the Finance Department. The reports are in our packets and they will be placed on file. Recorder's Office.
Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to let you know, I'm sure you can tell by looking at the reports, but we've actually hit a seasonal downturn. And actually with inflation, I think that's probably playing a little bit of it too. The numbers of documents are down about 120 documents a day for the last month or so compared to last year. The revenue is still staying pretty strong though. It's down some, but not quite as much. And that's once again, because of some of the corporation sales that are going on. So, you know, when you have a $50 million sale, it kind of makes up a lot of ground there. So, yeah.
Good. Everything going smoothly?
Yes. Mhm.
All right. Treasurer's Office. Good morning.
Good morning. Our report is on file. We're at this moment now preparing our mobile home tax bills, and we're still collecting tax deferral applications until March 1st.
We still have money in the bank?
A little bit.
Okay. Supervisor of Assessments. Mark, before you get started, I want to congratulate you on once again getting a 1.0 factor on the modification, which has been going on for.
This is the 35th consecutive year. Although I've only been here for 16, so I can't take all the credit for that.
Well, you can take credit for all of it.
Nobody would know.
Well, thank you. My report is on page, it begins on page 26 of your packets. I want to call your attention to something at the very bottom of page 26, where I talk about how we're going to mail out, starting in the middle of next month, applications for the Senior Citizen Assessment Freeze Homestead Exemption. And I think we've reached a time where I would be grateful for some counsel from the county board on this. Now, no decision needs to be made today because this is something we want to talk about for next year. This is an exemption that there is no requirement that we mail out all the applications for it. If someone doesn't get an application, then they get their tax bill and realize they don't have this, they can be issued what's called a certificate of error. That creates work in the treasurer's office, it's work in my office, but more importantly, it actually reduces revenues rather than changing the tax rate and simply reallocating the balance of where property tax revenues come from. So every taxing body would lose money for everyone that comes in. So we try to do is get them as loaded as possible. Now, if you look in the middle of page 27, you'll see in 2021, we granted 8,001 senior citizen assessment fees homestead exemptions. That's for low-income seniors. The 35,176 that are going to be mailed out are for the senior citizen exemptions that already exist in the county. So every household that we've already identified as a senior homeowner is already going to get an application. At some point, we want to ask a question, is that still what we want to do? And the main concern is that it costs money. Now, the good news for me is it doesn't cost money out of my budget because postage doesn't come out of my budget. It comes out of a different budget, but that doesn't mean I don't want to be sensitive to that and pay attention to that. Now, this has been the practice going on for nearly 30 years. If we want to make some changes, we'll want to think about what those changes might be and what the potential impacts. So what I propose to do is to come back to you at a later date. I want to get some statistics of how many people each year, how much variance that is each year, how many new applications we get as opposed to continuing applications. Because I think we'd certainly send it to everyone who'd received it in the prior year, maybe the prior 2 years, or maybe some other version, and then compare that to the actual revenue costs of mailing compared to what the breakpoint is of how many certificates of error would wipe out any savings by not mailing that out. So in other words, create a business case and then seek your counsel on what you think that we should do. Now, if what you end up telling me is, Mark, send them out, we don't care, that's okay. I'm happy to do that. If you think we ought to go a little bit different of a route, we can do that too. As I say again, we don't have enough information this morning to present to you. It's not a decision that's pending because we had to make this decision before today for this year. So this would be something going forward for next year. And we decide that is kind of part of the budget cycle. So if, unless there's any questions, I'll move past that issue. Yes.
Are you able to filter out the mailings to only go to an age demographic?
Yes, we mail them only to senior citizen households, and that's measured by who is already getting the senior citizen homestead exemption. That's where the 35,176 comes from that we mail it out. So that would be people who have already, we know they're a homeowner, we know they're liable for the property taxes, and we know they're over 65.
What approximately broad brushed, what does 35,000 mailers? I know it's not your budget, but is that just a 50-cent mail, or is the cost of the piece, or what?
It's the cost of the piece is part of what's all billed. It's the cost of the piece is billed to me. The cost of the postage is billed to wherever the mailroom's budget comes from.
So if it's $1 a piece at $35,000,
Yes.
what is the typical of those that you mail? How many are receiving the exemption, and what does that exemption entail?
Last year, it was 8,001 was the actual number who actually received the exemption by the time of certification.
8,001 translates to what dollar figure?
There's no individual dollar that we could assign. The general homestead and the senior citizen are hardwired dollar amounts. But what this would be in every single one would be the difference between their base year value and their final value. Now, that's actually a number that's easily obtained, and I can show that historically. The clerk actually has that on their websites in the tax extension detail reports. It hasn't been calculated yet for 2021 payable 22 because we can't calculate it until we get the final the information from the state, which just came 2 days ago.
Yeah, Mark, my intentions of my soliloquy is that, in comments, is that, are we spending $35,000 to save $35,000, which seems like a wash, or are we spending $35,000 that assists our seniors to the tune of $300,000?
And that's exactly the analysis that I propose to make.
Super. And I would, that executive summary, that's the information I'd be looking for.
That's what I was seeking today. What information will help you provide counsel on this topic? So that's very helpful. Thank you. And we're thinking along the same lines.
Mark, Vern Tepe here. I know that particularly in Elgin Township, that the supervisor there, or I should say the assessor there in his office really does a phenomenal job in working with the senior citizens. And I'm wondering if maybe the other assessors might be interested in helping to participate with that.
All 16 of our township assessors already do that. The information here we're talking about is just getting the application out to them. We time it to mail it out in mid-March because that's around the time that their tax returns would be completed and ready to mail in for the prior year, because that income from the tax return is one of the things that application is dependent on. So that's why we don't mail it out January 1st, because people will lose the application before they get their taxes done. We don't mail it out June 1st because then the taxes will already be done, be filed, and people will forget about it. So we try to time it about the same way. But yes, there is a lot of help already given at the township level in addition to the county level. Plus, Senior Services of Elgin and Senior Services of Aurora have been trained to provide assistance as well.
And also, Mark, the income limit for senior exempt is 65,000, correct?
A household income of 65,000, and that includes the applicant's spouse, whether the spouse lives with the applicant or not, and anyone else who used that property as a principal dwelling as of January 1st, 2022.
Well, I know that effective this year that those people on Social Security just received a fairly substantial increase. And I know how dependent people are on this senior freeze on occasion to help them stay in their house. And I was wondering if that 65,000 was going to be increased anytime soon.
That's a question for the state legislature. That's something we cannot do locally.
I know, I just thought you might have some.
There are bills every year to introduce to change that. And those bills, sometimes they go somewhere, sometimes they don't. But typically every few years there's an increase. The real pushback we see in Springfield for increasing it is $65,000 means a lot in some places and not so much in others. Talking to some of my colleagues who are in the far downstate counties near the Ohio and Mississippi River confluence, and their overlap of people who get the senior and get the senior freeze is nearly 100%. Nobody who's a senior is making more than 65,000. Our overlap is less than 25%. And that's been pretty consistent over the years.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, we will move on. Thank you, Bart.
You're welcome.
I see Pat Del Santo is online, so the Regional Office of Education, good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Chairman Tepe, Kopi's present, sorry.
What, Mr. Copey?
It's just checking in.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I showed up a little bit late. I'm present.
Okay, thank you. We have you now. Pat, please go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'd like to remind you of two big dates that are coming up for our office. March 4th is our Countywide Institute Day. We are out of the Q Center for the most part. There will be some sessions taking place within the districts. And it's from 8 until 3:15. We're focusing on social and emotional learning. And all of you are invited. If you do plan to come, if you'd give me a call ahead of time, parking is going to be really tight. So if you give me a call ahead of time, I'll make sure we have a parking place for you. The other big date coming up is April 29th. And that is our Educator of the Year dinner. I'd like you to put it on your calendars if you can attend at all. It means a lot to the teachers throughout the county when county board members do attend. And April 29th, that too is at the Q Center. And the nominations for that are all due on March 18th, at which point we will have a committee that judges them. And our committee is made up of retired teachers, student teachers, business members from the community, And they all sit down, they review the nominations, and they make recommendations for the different categories and for the overall Educator of the Year. So those are the two things I wanted to remind you of. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr.
Surges here. Pat,
Yes.
two questions or a question and a statement. First one is, excuse my naive posture here, but do the local school superintendents report to you? Is there a correlation there or not?
Not, they do not
Okay.
report to me.
Okay.
They report to their local school boards. There are some things that the district as a whole must do to be in compliance, and that comes under my office. But as far as their leadership and their implementing board policy, that's all up to their school boards, not to me.
Okay, thank you. And
Mhm.
and then just a huge reminder, shout out that last year's Teacher of the Year was a young lady from St. Charles class of 81. And at my reunion this past summer, we ran into her and made a big deal of it. And it means so much to these people just to get that acknowledgement
It truly does.
for what it's worth.
It's
Thank
an
you
honor
very
just
much.
to
I
be
appreciate
nominated,
that.
but yes. Okay, thank you, Pat.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
Lewis permission?
Ms. Lewis, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that although the superintendents and the school boards don't report to the Regional Board of Education, they certainly use it as a resource. And the educational things that come out of the regional board, like the one on May 4th, and like there's one next week on trauma for youth and stuff. Those are very, very appreciated, very well attended. The Regional Office of Education is doing an amazing job in our community. So thank you, Pat.
Thank you. And we do meet with the superintendents. We all meet weekly, and also with the health department, just to talk about what's happening. And it's a good time where they can share what's going on in their districts. And they really do try to be uniform throughout the county, given that there are local needs. So thank you.
You might want to comment on any COVID outbreaks that have been happening in the schools, any issues there that we need to be aware of or should know about?
Well, you all know that mask recommended versus no mask is an issue in the communities.
Oh, yes.
And you know that there's a legal case pending, and that JCAR just said that IDPH cannot just go by what the governor's emergency order is. They have to go through their normal process to put forth rules and recommendations in regard to COVID. Cases in our schools are way, way down, and our schools are starting to pivot. But again, they're local control, and so they're local school boards. Some of them already had policies in place regarding masking, and so those remain in place. They're not affected by the court ruling unless they were a named defendant, and they're not affected by the JCAR ruling. So it sometimes people would like to see overnight results, but it takes some time to pivot.
It does.
All right, thank you. Madam Chair?
Pat,
Good morning.
hi. Good morning. Perhaps at next month's meeting, could you give us an update as a whole of how our children are doing as far as social, emotional impact of COVID now that we are pivoting, so
Sure.
that we have a broader perspective of what our students need?
Our students need so much, but yes, I would be happy to do that for next time.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Gums, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Gums?
I wondered, can we get the dates that she was referencing? I know Ms. Strathman said, asked that also, but I missed them.
The date for the March 4th was the Institute at Q Center,
Mhm.
and April 29th was the award dinner.
Thank you very much.
Perhaps Chair, Pat could send that out. We could send it to Jane and she can send it out to all the board members just
Sure.
to get, great. That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Okay. All right, let's move on to the county clerk, Mr. Pollock. Morning, Brian.
Good morning. Real quick, I wanted to thank Pat for the collaboration between her office and ours and reaching out to students who were interested in being student election judges and to teachers who will be off in June and then in November for election day that would be interested in participating as election judges. So they've sent out some messages and just wanted to thank her publicly for the assistance that her office has provided. You guys have the report in front of you. Numbers are trending in the right direction. We're up again in June and January. What month is it? January compared to last year. I felt like June yesterday.
Getting ahead of yourself.
Yeah, June's on the mind. Again, marriage licenses, passports, as things are slowly turning around, we're seeing the revenue numbers show that as well. It's a busy time in the clerk's office, tax extension, getting ready for the election. We'll have some things probably in the next few months to, work with, to share to the committee as we move along. It's been a process, as I imagine Roger will talk about as well, so.
Yes, Mr. Sanchez.
Surges.
Mr. Surges. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to comment, we had a meeting up at the north end a few weeks back and had asked Jack's office to supply a representative to help us walk through the precinct changes in terms of what's next. Not going backwards, not asking who, what, where, when, why, but how do we proceed forward? While Jack was at first reluctant, he very much came to the plate. And Mr. Duggan, who I apologize because I've been calling him Dugan, I didn't realize until that evening I was mispronouncing it. John did a phenomenal job in a very well-behaved crowd of 50 to 60 people. And it was spectacular. And I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge very well-behaved crowd. I'm hoping that he's giving the same report back to you guys. And it was so very much appreciated. And it was a Tuesday evening. He stayed till about 9 o'clock and we kept it on a very narrow bandwidth for him. And I think it was an extremely successful evening. So
Good. Madam Chair.
Brian, has the database, the walk list been updated yet, or is that still in the process for the new precincts?
We've asked Roger to be here to specifically deal with that.
Oh,
So
okay. Very
Roger,
good.
perhaps you would answer
Okay.
that question.
Yeah, this is Roger Fonstock from the County IT Department. So we've completed the work in GIS for the maps, which that was reconciling all the precincts, the districts from county board, legislative, congressional. So all of the work on that side has been done to get the lines and the data exported. We've imported it into the voter registration system, which is DFM. So it's in there now, and we have Raymond and the elections staff are going through the data and running reports and testing and validating. And right now, as much as our goal is to be done by the end of this month with validating everything, I think we're in that 2 to 3 weeks timeframe, which will be the completion of voter registration being updated with all the new districts and all the voters. I believe there's somewhere north of 300,000 voters that get recoded in that process. And then there'll be the follow-up to that is we obviously have to get notice out and cards and other things that'll be forthcoming. But that's kind of the time frame that we're on right now is the end of February, 2 to 3 weeks from now. We'll be done with voter registration updates. The other part of this that we're working on, which I think is going to be really helpful, if you go to kanecountyclerk.org, there's a link on there that goes to a map section. I would encourage people to look at that. It has all the current maps for precincts. It has all the current jurisdictional maps. If you go to the bottom of it, there's an interactive GIS map, which you can turn on the 2022 layers for county board and precinct, and you can actually drill down to the house if the house is, out of a district. So if you're not sure about, where a street is or a house is, that interactive map is really a good tool. The static maps are good as well. You have to zoom in quite a bit, on a static map or print it. But the interactive maps are out there, the precinct maps are out there, the county board maps, all the jurisdiction maps, and they're all the current versions. So that part is done. I think the last piece is once we get voter registration data validated and it's up and running again, they would be able to produce all the lists and reports that the people request. We have had several FOIA or public requests for information through the clerk's office that we've been working with them to satisfy. And their questions about, can I get a copy of the precincts? Can I get a copy of the shape files? They're organizations that study jurisdictions and mapping and things like that. And we're working with the clerk's office to make sure that all of those interested parties get, the maps that they want. So they're not held up by any of our process. But I think we've managed to get all those requests out. We've probably had 3 or 4 of those requests that we've done this week. I think that's pretty much it. So I would say we're still on target for that 2 to 3 week time frame. Maybe less if we have good results with the elections department. The other thing that I would point out is that we did this in a way in which the process and procedures are being refined and kind of documented so that we can reproduce this effort in the future. So when the county board decides to inevitably split a precinct, the process for doing this again will be much quicker and it'll be much more streamlined because we've documented everything that we've done this time. So I imagine or envision this will happen with greater frequency yearly, and we'll be able to process that. We're trying to get the process down to where we actually know the amount of time that it will take as opposed to estimating. So if we're in that 4 to 6 week time frame to turn the whole thing around, I think that would be a good number for the clerk's office to know because they depend on that and obviously the candidates and the public. So having it in a very tight timeline will help. But I think that's all we have for an update. It's been going well. I think everybody's still cooperating really well. And we've been able to move through the data. I don't know of any requests for map or data that we have not provided yet. So if anybody knows of anything that we haven't provided, I'd like to know because we can work with the clerk's office to get it.
I really want to compliment everybody involved, in particular on putting up the maps. The maps are up there by township, so you can quite readily go look and see the township map with all of its precincts. And then you can also get a map of any individual precinct. So having that kind of data up there, I'm sure has alleviated the situation. And I know from personal comments to me about people who have called the clerk's office about individual matters, they've been extremely complimentary on how they've been handled. So this is not an easy task and was not an easy task, and it's not done yet. But the way everybody has cooperated has just, to me, been a tribute to the way everything else seems to operate here in Kane County. It's been very well done. So thank you. Any other questions? Goodness. Okay. Gee, I wasn't ready to. I need a. I need a motion to put reports on file.
So move, Surges.
Second.
All in favor? Or do
Aye.
we have to do a roll call.
Yeah, we roll call.
Just forget that.
Brown,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Copy,
Opie, yes.
Pepe.
Pepe, yes.
Yes.
And in honor of Mr. Kenyon being here, may I have someone make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Surges.
Be a good candidate.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.